I don't get him. Mary Margaret glanced forward at Emma. Cameron? Emma nodded. They were in her bug on the way to the hospital. Ashley was in the back of the car beside Mary Margaret, breathing heavily. She had gone into labor while they were having breakfast, and Emma seemed determined not to let the girl out of her sight until the child was born. He's not as bad as everyone thinks, Mary Margaret said. But he's not as good as you would like, Emma observed, glancing back in the rearview mirror. Mary Margaret couldn't meet her eyes. She kept her attention on Ashley, who was clinging to her hand and whimpering every time a contraction hit her. You're doing great, Ashley, she said quietly. You shouldn't have done that, the girl whispered, looking at Emma. You don't know what happens when you make a deal with him. Mary Margaret clenched her teeth but kept her peace, dabbing at Ashley's sweat-dotted brow with one of Cameron's handkerchiefs. She already knew that Cameron, the husband, was very different from Mr. Gold, the businessman. All the same, from everything that both Cameron and Ashley had said, Ashley was the one who tried to break a deal when he made arrangements to find her child a home and security. It was the wrong way to go about doing the right thing, and while she couldn't approve of his method, she could understand his reasoning. As soon as they reached the hospital, Emma hustled the younger woman in, and Mary Margaret trailed after them. As sorry as she felt for the girl, she couldn't help a pang of jealousy that a mere child could accidentally find herself in a condition that Mary Margaret had longed to be in for years. She wrapped her arms over her middle, choosing to walk instead through the quiet halls, while Ashley was rushed away to the maternity suite. She knew she shouldn't be jealous. It was pointless and petty, but the idea of having a child, holding a child, being a mother, a hand on her shoulder made her spin around with a small cry of surprise. David Nolan, was standing there in a dressing gown. He was still pale and drawn, but he was walking around, which was a good sign. He smiled hesitantly, but there was a frown crinkling the corners of his eyes. You're Mary Margaret. Mrs. Gold, aren't you? He said. She nodded, searching his features. He was exactly as he was in her dreams, smiling, gracious, charming. And you're David Nolan. He laughed self-consciously, rubbing the back of his neck with one hand. So they tell me, he said. I didn't mean to startle you, but I hadn't seen you since I was brought back. I wanted to thank you. She frowned. Thank me? She asked, puzzled. For saving my life, he clarified. The sheriff said you were there when they found me. He said I would be dead if you hadn't known what to do. Oh! Mary Margaret's cheeks flushed. I had forgotten. She laughed self-consciously. It seemed like the honorable thing to do. Even if you don't remember doing it. He grinned at her, warm and bright, nothing like Cameron's sparing, brief smiles. Nice to see I made such an impression, he said. Maybe we should start over. He held out a hand. Hi, I'm David. Mary Margaret looked down at his hand, then clasped it in hers. It was broad, strong, and she wished she hadn't touched him skin to skin. It was stupid, this crush. It was stupid and harmful, and she was married, and so was he. But her hand was in his, and it felt right, and she smiled cautiously up at him. Mary Margaret, is me. His smile seemed to brighten his whole face. Well, Mary Margaret, he said, and she was amused when he bowed slightly at the waist. I'm very pleased to meet you. She drew her hand back and performed a playful curtsy. Likewise, good sir, she said. He looked around them, then back at her. Would you walk with me? He asked. I'm meant to exercise, but the halls are so boring, it's tempting to go back and play solitaire. Mary Margaret hesitated, and he held up his hands. Don't worry. If you have somewhere to be, I play a mean hand of solitaire. Isn't your wife... For a moment, he looked lost. Oh, right. Catherine. He frowned as if he couldn't recall if that was the right name. I think she's working. She only comes in the evening, and it's not exactly a social hub. He gave her a pleading look. Just half an hour, if you can spare it? He raised his eyebrows hopefully. Would you take mercy on me and keep me from going insane from boredom? Mary Margaret looked down the long halls. Emma would be taking care of Ashley, she knew, and she couldn't really face a woman who would sell a child. It wouldn't hurt just to walk for a little with another patient. She had done it with dozens of others, after all. "I can walk with you for a little while," she said, trying not to be as happy as she was when his smile returned. After all, it was only a walk, and he was only a patient. What harm could it do?